The morning after my wedding, before I even opened my eyes, I felt it. What was it? It wasn't romance. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even nervousness about being a new wife. It was pressure. Not loud, not dramatic. Just sitting there heavy in the room with me. Because in the Amish community, your wedding night isn't only about what happens between a husband and wife. It marks the beginning of something else entirely, a countdown. And by the time you walk into church as a married woman for the very first time, people aren't just noticing your new status. They're silently counting. Months. But why are they counting? Amish weddings are nothing like the fairy tales people imagine. There's no glamorous venue, no music swelling in the background, no decorated getaway car. The day starts before sunrise. You put on a simple dress, often one you made yourself, pin your hair carefully, and prepare for a church service. That stretches for hours. The benches are hard. The hymns are slow. There are no instruments, just voices rising and falling in steady rhythm. The preaching focuses on obedience, commitment, humility, and lifelong devotion. Marriage isn't presented as romance, it's presented as responsibility. You sit beside the man who has been your courtship partner likely for months or even years, but never without supervision. You've talked. You've walked together. You may have sat close in a buggy ride, but you've never truly been alone. Not really. And everyone in that room knows that when the sun sets, that changes. After the ceremony comes the meal. Long table set up in a barn or home filled with food prepared by family and neighbors. Chicken, mashed potatoes, pies, homemade bread. The room hums with conversation. People smile at you differently now. The younger girls watch you with curiosity. The older women study you with knowing expressions. There are hugs, handshakes, quiet congratulations. No one says the word sex. No one makes jokes. Amish modesty runs too deep for that. But the understanding hangs in the air anyway. By the time evening falls and the guests begin to leave, your cheeks ache from smiling. Your body is exhausted. Your mind is spinning from the sudden shift in identity. You're no longer someone's daughter under her parents' roof. You are a wife. And when you walk into your bedroom that night, a simple room with plain wooden furniture, a handmade quilt, no decorations meant to spark romance. The silence feels louder than the entire wedding day. There are no candles, no music, no whispered advice beyond maybe a few vague words from your mother or an older married friend. Be patient, be kind, trust God. That's usually the extent of it. Growing up Amish, modesty is everything. You're taught to lower your eyes, to dress plainly, to avoid drawing attention to your body. Physical boundaries are strict. You don't kiss casually. You don't talk openly about desire. You don't learn detailed lessons in school about intimacy. Education typically ends after 8th grade. And conversations about sex are brief and practical at best. You know it exists. Of course you do, but it's wrapped in silence. So when you step into marriage, the rules don't slowly bend. They flip overnight. What was once forbidden becomes allowed. What once brought correction now becomes expected. The shift is instant. There's no transition period where you ease into being a wife. You are simply there alone. For the first time in your relationship, and for many brides, that privacy itself is overwhelming. Amish homes are full. Families are large. Doors are often left open. Community life means constant presence, so standing in a quiet room with your husband and realizing no one will interrupt, that can feel almost shocking. But as intense as that night may feel, the deeper pressure begins the next morning. Because in Amish culture, marriage and parenthood are tightly connected. Children are viewed as blessings from God. Large families are common. 8 or 9 children isn't unusual. Some families have even more. The idea of intentionally preventing. Pregnancy is often discouraged or simply not discussed. In many communities, birth control is frowned upon. In others, it's just quietly assumed that faithful couples will accept whatever children God gives them. So once you're married, the expectation is clear. Even if it's never spoken out loud, you will begin a family, and you will begin soon. The first Sunday you attend church as a married woman feels different. Your head covering may change slightly to reflect your new status. People look at you differently. There's warmth in their smiles, but also awareness. The older married women greet you with a certain softness. Some of them remember exactly how it felt to stand where you're standing. And in their eyes, you sense it. The clock has started. No one approaches you and demands news. That would be too direct. Amish communities rarely confront things bluntly when it comes to personal matters. Instead, the counting happens quietly. 3 months, 4, 5. If another young wife announces she's expecting within her first few months of marriage, it's celebrated with joy. It's considered a sign of blessing, of health, of God's favor. Her pregnancy becomes part of community conversation. Baby blankets are sewn, names are guested, meals are planned. But if 6 months pass for you with no announcement, people begin to wonder. Not always. Maliciously. Just curiously. I wonder when they'll have news. They're young. It will happen. I had my first within the first year. The comments float through gatherings, often not even directed at you, but you hear them anyway. Amish communities are small. Everyone knows everyone. There are no secrets for long. News spreads quickly, sometimes faster than you expect. If a year passes and you're still not pregnant, the curiosity deepens. Some people may gently ask how you're feeling. Others may offer quiet advice about prayer or rest. A few might suggest herbal remedies or faith-based encouragement. You start to feel like your body has become a community topic, even if no one says it directly to your face. And that's the strange thing about this kind of pressure. It doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It seeps into your thoughts during quiet moments. When you're washing dishes, when you're hanging laundry, when you're sitting beside your husband in church listening to another sermon about family and blessings, you start doing math in your head, counting days, replaying timelines, wondering who else is calculating alongside you. At 19 or 20 years old, you're still learning who you are. You've barely stepped into adulthood. Yet suddenly you're responsible for running a household, cooking meals from scratch, supporting your husband's work, managing expectations from both families, and potentially preparing to raise a child. There is very little space for hesitation. There isn't a widely accepted idea of just enjoying marriage for a while. The culture moves forward quickly. Marriage flows naturally into parenthood. That's the rhythm most people follow. And when your rhythm doesn't match that timeline, it can feel isolating. If pregnancy doesn't happen quickly, self-doubt creeps in. You might not speak it out loud. You might not even admit it fully to yourself, but the questions whisper anyway. Is something wrong with me? Is God withholding a blessing? Am I already failing at the one role I've been raised to fulfill? Medical intervention varies by community. Some are open to seeking doctors if there's a concern. Others rely heavily on prayer and patience first. But regardless of the approach, the waiting can feel heavy. And because modesty is so central, you rarely discuss these fears openly. Admitting anxiety can feel like admitting doubt. And doubt in a deeply religious culture is uncomfortable territory. So you keep smiling. You show up to church. You cook large meals for gatherings. You sew baby clothes for other women's children. You try not to let the ticking in your head grow too loud. From the outside, Amish marriages look peaceful and steady. Outsiders romanticize them. They imagine simplicity, devotion, quiet love by lantern light. But they don't see how quickly girlhood ends. They don't see how much of a young bride's identity becomes tied to something she cannot fully control. They don't see how something deeply personal becomes woven into community expectation. When a bride finally announces she's expecting, the relief is often visible, not only from her, but from the people around her. The unspoken questions dissolve. The counting stops. She has stepped fully into the role everyone anticipated. And there's joy in that moment. Real joy. But beneath it, there can also be exhaustion, because now the expectation shifts again. When will the second baby come? In a culture where large families are normal, spacing between children is often short. Motherhood becomes a continuous journey. One baby leads to another. Years blur together in diapers, meals, laundry, church services, pregnancies, And it all began with that first quiet countdown. Looking back, what shocks me most isn't what happened on my wedding night. It wasn't scandalous or dramatic. It was human, awkward, emotional, private. What truly shocked me was how quickly privacy ended, how something sacred between two people became part of a larger rhythm that everyone seemed to track. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one early morning, months after my wedding. The house was still sunlight filtered through the window. I traced patterns in the wood grain with my finger. Lost in thought, I was counting days, counting Sundays, counting how many church services had passed since the wedding, and I wondered who else was counting. 2. No one had confronted me. No one had accused me of anything. But the expectation was woven so tightly into the culture that it didn't need to be spoken. It lived in the smiles, in the questions, in the silence. People often ask, what's so shocking about Amish wedding nights? They expect some hidden dramatic secret. Behind closed doors, they imagine mystery and scandal. But the real intensity isn't about what happens in that room. It's about what happens after. It's about the invisible timeline that starts ticking the moment you say your vows. It's about being 19 years old and feeling like your worth is quietly measured in months. It's about realizing that in a tight-knit world, nothing stays entirely private, not even the most intimate parts of your life. Your wedding night isn't just the start of physical intimacy, it's the beginning of being seen differently, measured differently, watched differently.